Hello, I'm Sam, and this is a short recording of one of my blogs, Scafell Pike, Never Quite Lost Among the Clouds. On YouTube, it's also accompanied with a short slideshow of photos I took. As will become evident, there isn't a great deal of photos on this one, but please enjoy. Scafell Pike is the highest point in England. How could I not travel there? Go on that pilgrimage of sorts, to stand on England's crown. I had built up a neat pile of excuses. It was too far a journey, too expensive, too high up on terrain, too challenging. Simply put, it was too much for me. I'd get there at some point, a point that never seemed to get closer. Until it did. My worries had slowly been eroded without my notice, as I'd been enjoying walks of a more welcoming nature. My apprehension hadn't gone entirely. As I sat on the bus waiting to begin my bid for the summit, a part of me whispered that this route I had planned wasn't for me. For strong walkers only, my guidebook cautioned. Am I a strong walker? Put me in the hills of England's southeast, and I would feel it so. Up here in the Lake District's mountains, well, time would tell. My doubts were fettered, though, not just with this knowledge of passports completed, but also the magical tingle of excitement. In combination, these emotions manifested as a nervousness that let me know that I was about to do something truly worthwhile. So I jumped off the bus and headed for adventure. It didn't start well. Within a minute I found myself at a dead end, getting barred at by some sheep. I turned around to see about 10 people. Turns out they had been following me. Pretty much everyone else who'd been on the bus. They had, somehow, got the impression that I knew what I was doing. A short backtrack and I found the path, just as the presumed farmer came out to give the large group of people stood in his garden directions. Sorry about that. The sign and the path were obvious from this side, but had been obstructed by a bush on the other. Still, my entourage and I were on the right path now, heading up past the old Dungeon Gill pub, up to join the Cumbria Way, a path that runs 84 miles north-south through Cumbria. I made a mental note to return and do the whole thing, should life allow. It was a grey day. Hills rose on either side of me and ahead, their tops disappearing into the clouds. What could be seen was cast a dark shade of green by the dim light. I wasn't too worried. The forecast was for the cloud to lift above the hills around noon. The path slowly gained elevation, following the cut spaced out by Mickledale Beck. The bus fellowship started to spread out as each of us hit their natural strides. Me and a couple from Northern Europe, possibly Denmark, travelled at near enough the same pace. After a while we crossed Mickledale Beck and started to head more steeply uphill, leaving the Cumbria Way behind. The rocky path worked its way up in a zigzag to make easier work of the gradient and avoid especially rocky outcrops. My lungs were not too happy at all this hard work, so as I approached the top I couldn't help but feel it was time for a good sit down. The couple from Northern Europe, possibly Germany, passed by as I enjoyed a nibble on a breakfast bar. Once I got going again, the ground soon levelled off and the wind started to pick up. As I looked around I couldn't help but notice that I appeared to have found myself in one of those clouds. Or fog, I suppose it was from my new vantage point. Visibility wasn't the best, with things 15 metres or so away disappearing into the grey. I had half a plan to detour up Rossett Pike, a hill that should have been somewhere off to my right. I could see its brooding silhouette sitting mysteriously out there, but the path must have snuck by, hidden in the fog. I did, however, see the couple from Northern Europe, possibly Norway, peering at the map trying to work out where to go. An event that occurred many times as we made our way through the fog towards Scafell Pike. Each of us stopping, staring at our maps and hoping we were going in the right way, exchanging a few words on our shared feeling of lostness. After having walked through the fog for an hour or so, I bumped into a young couple of lads who were a bit confused as to where they were as well. At this point, I cheated, dug out my phone and checked the GPS. We were, it turned out, roughly where I thought we were. Hoping they were feeling reassured, I headed off again at my normal walking rhythm. Then came Ilcrag, followed by its neighbour Broadcrag. These are two of the highest points in England, yet you will find few who celebrate them, or head out to claim their summits. In part, this is because of their lofty neighbours, it's true. You have to be special to stand out near the Scarfells. Mostly though, it is because they are true hellscapes, covered both in a field of boulders that make crossing them a test of balance, as its surface does the best to trap your feet and trip you. So far, the path had been good as mountain paths go. Easy to follow, but for the fog. The path across the crags was less so. It is marked only by the passing of those who have polished the rocks with their feet, and by cairns, piles of rocks that lead somewhere, but don't have the courtesy of telling you where. With the fog gathered close, and the ground being a pile of rocks, well, it was easy for a specific pile of rocks to hide. It was in these less than welcoming surrounds that the couple from Northern Europe, possibly Sweden, the lost lads and I came together to form a larger group. Crossing these boulder fields, struggling to stay upright in a fog that seemed to be getting thicker, no one wanted to be alone up here, lost among the clouds. Soon a man passed our impromptu group, and we all sped up to keep pace. Here was someone who knew where he was going, who would get us to Scafell Pike. If only we could keep up, we were saved. At least for 2 minutes. Soon after our chase began, he stopped suddenly. It turned out that he felt as misplaced as the rest of us. We'd lost a hero, but gained a party member. We had not lost the Khans, so we followed them still. In a short while we found ourselves at the maw of an abyss. The ground suddenly dropped down steeply into a swirling mist that obscured us from whatever lay in its depths. On a clear day we would have seen a small dip down that quickly turned back up, to rise into the great rocky block that is Scafell Pike. On a clear day we would have felt that rush that comes from the last leg, re-energised and excited. It was not a clear day. We hesitated. Most would, I think. Reflecting on it, I remembered that this fit with what I was expecting, and the descriptions I had read of the journey. I told my newly acquired acquaintances this, but they were not convinced. In hindsight, I could have argued a stronger case. I was more confident than my words and tone said, but I didn't want to be the guy to lead our group of random people astray. I was, however, going down that hill regardless. Hoping that some of the group might follow, I said I was going, and started putting one foot in front of the other. No one followed, but one of the people from Northern Europe, possibly the Netherlands, told me not to get lost. "I already am," I replied, not entirely sure if it was the truth or a joke I had intended it to be. Not for long though, as I soon found myself on Scafell Pike's stony summit. It was cold, rocky, windy and foggy. I took a picture of the trig point and the wind shelter and my face. I also took a moment to try and take it in, that I had made it to the top of England, and then I turned to head back the way I came. I passed my former group as they made their way towards the summit, my pride at being right washed with the guilt of not saving them some extra walking. Now I had a decision to make. My plan had been to take in 2 additional mountains, Scafell Pike and Scafell, on the way down. It would be easier than doing them separately, as from this height they were more like mid-sized hills, if rockier and steeper than most. The main attraction had been the views they offered, yet the fog, which had been forecast to lift by the long past noon, was showing no signs of thinning. As I made my way up to Broad Crag, I knew I was headed straight for the bus stop. Some time later I found myself on the summit of Scafell Pike. I confess I did not pause to take it in. I passed over it quickly, down into Ore Gap, the valley which sits between Scafell Pike and Scafell. I hadn't seen another person since I turned from the direct path to the bus stop. Between that, the oppressive atmosphere produced by the fog, and my growing fatigue, I felt quite alone. Not lonely, but a pervasive sense that whatever happens here is on me, that the rest of the world was just out of reach. I found a seat among the collection of surprisingly comfortable boulders and sat there a short while, drank a little, ate a little, and reclaimed my centre. I could not dwell long though. I had another mountain to summit and a bus to catch. After another uphill stretch I found myself on top of Scafell. Another rocky summit, but here the boulders are large and flat-faced, and at just the right angle to make standing difficult but possible. It is renowned for its views, but all I could see was the interior of this cloud, in which I had resided for far too long. A panic rose in my mind as I looked for the path. I couldn't see it. Any cairns lost among the rocks of a small boulder field ahead of me. The slippery ground seemed to want me gone, and, feeling warm from the walk so far, I wanted more reassurance than I'd normally ask. My phone's GPS re-emerged. I was, as it turned out, in the right place, facing the right direction. I was on the right path, even if I couldn't see it. Thankful for modern technology, I started down the mountain. My thighs had started to shake from all the strain when I stood still or put my knees at too sharp an angle. But it did not take long for the fog to become a cloud again, as I exited out under it into the sunshine below. I worked my way down to the bus stop and bed. As I look back on this now, I try to see the lesson in it, if only to have something to speak on should job interviews roll around. It remains the hardest walk I've ever done, yet my main takeaway is to trust myself. I doubted my ability to do it when I could. I felt lost often, even though I never strayed from the path. When I felt the need for a saviour, all I needed was a little reassurance. I was, throughout the whole trip, doing okay. It is possible that I did, in fact, know what I was doing. I think we all feel like this sometimes, lost in life's own clouds, unable to see the path, or unsure if it's even the right one. In these times it is okay to seek reassurance, or to sit for a while and collect yourself before travelling on. For every path has challenges enough to make for a weary traveller, but most can be overcome.